United we're as strong as a mountain. United we're as deep.
This is Steve Zeltzer with WorkWeek, and one of the struggles that is happening today is the struggle of school workers, particularly service workers in Los Angeles Unified School District. And joining us today is Gilbert Feliciano. He is a service worker in SEIU99, and they've been having a struggle to get better conditions and also to deal with the wages, the inflation, and trying to survive in Los Angeles. So welcome to WorkWeek.
Thank you for having me.
So Gilbert, why don't you talk about the issues that your members are concerned about in this upcoming contract fight with Los Angeles Unified School District?
Well, as you alluded to earlier, everything is going up. So the primary thing on every worker's mind is a livable wage increase. It's come to our attention that the district has approximately, or over, I should say, $4.5 billion in their coffers. So it isn't a matter of, can they? I mean, the problem is they keep funneling a lot of this money upward. If you recall, maybe 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago, they gave themselves a raise. And they went from, I believe the superintendent went from $110,000 or something like that to $330,000, and that's a substantial raise. That's way more than livable wage, not counting all the perks that they get just from having that position. On top of that, a lot of our workers are disrespected at work. Some hours aren't paid. So there's also a lot of unfair labor practice cases that a lot of employees have put in through the union to raise awareness and basically build a case against the district. And it just keeps going on. I mean, we can talk about how a lot of the most vital employees are the most exploited, the ones that have close contact, for example, during the pandemic with the students weren't compensated properly. And, before and during, they kept talking about how we were heroes and how essential these essential workers were, and then after, I mean, they were so quick to kick us in the ass and say, you know what, thanks for coming in. No additional bonuses, no hazard pay, just, things continue as usual. More privatization. Every day there's a new charter school just siphoning money from the district and making it more difficult for the employees to make a valid case.
And Eli Broad, he was a billionaire who was supporting a lot of these charter schools. Why are charter schools bad for public schools? And how do they affect your members?
Well, this might not be PC, but I'm not sorry to see him go. Eli Broad was a charter villain, because that's really what they are. They're charter villains dressed as philanthropists. Essentially what happens is the reason why charters are a problem in public education is they slide in through co-locations a lot of times. So you'll have a public school which has an art department, music department, has rooms for all their population. And sometimes through this co-location, as they call it, these charters will be granted access to certain rooms. And it's almost like a virus. They'll take one room, then the next room. Eventually they have half of the school before long, the entire school. The most successful schools in the Valley When I was growing up, for example, El Camino, Granada Hills, uh, academic beasts, decathlon winners and stuff, academic decathlon winners are all now charters, so all the great public schools that we had are now charters. And another reason why that's a problem is when you have these, the charterization of public schools, accountability goes down. And then you have a consultocracy that slides in. We actually had a case in El Camino where I believe it was the principal, kind of went a little buck wild with his credit card and, was living high on the hog, all kinds of champagne and expensive dinners. So that's kind of the problem, that the funds that should be going towards improving, enriching studies, the experiences, get funneled into lucrative positions. And it's always at the cost of not just the student population or the staff, but really the system of public education as a whole. Each charter, depending if it's a independent or a private, every charter basically is siphoning students away from public schools. Public schools get their funding based on student attendance. So if you have a student, fleeing from public towards charters, you also have the funds that are associated with that attendance moving from public schools to private hands. Eli Broad is probably the most notorious because he brings a bunch of students to the Eli Broad Center for concerts and all kinds of stuff. But Hastings from Netflix is another one. The DeVos family is another one. I mean, you have Reardon, Richard Reardon, former mayor of LA. You got former mayor Villaraigosa as well going in, and I mean, it just goes on and on. These public servants find a very lucrative avenue after their political stays, and unfortunately, it comes at the cost of public funds.
And how many of these charter schools have unionized janitors and service workers at them?
Well, last stat I had was that only approximately 5% of charters were unionized. And a lot of the ones that are unionized are the service employees, happen to, be there. And because it's almost like they get grandfathered in, they're there. I'm sure eventually, like with everything, they'll start maybe finding one of their friends that has some kind of cleaning service, and eventually they'll slowly get the private contractors, just like they did with the bus drivers that were district before. And then now you have all these, private contractors coming in, same with the special education employees that used to be public. And now you have these private agency one-on-ones that actually increase the labor load for the employee, because they're only there for limited paperwork. They're not actually there for a lot of the services. For example, if a student is having some kind of event, whether it's a physical self-injurious episode or a seizure or something like that, it's actually the district employee that has to step in. If a student gets soiled, has an accident or whatever, it's the public employee that comes in. It's not these private agencies. So really what you have is an increase in money that should be allocated for public employees going to these private agencies, but very limited services being provided by these private agencies, increasing the workload for the public employee at the same time. I mean, it's ridiculous, and it only keeps getting worse,
And this education campaign, the Democrats, who the unions support, SEIU, the UTLA, they seem to support charters. And in fact, in the bond measures that have been passed in California, which these unions have supported, money is going to charter schools. Our tax money is going to more charter schools. How do you figure that?
My personal opinion on that, I mean, I guess I would have you reach out to these, executive directors, presidents of these unions to really get the lowdown, get the story straight from the horse's mouth, if you will. But me looking at it just from a systemic situation, it appears that there might be some type of financial benefit that has to be happening, because it doesn't make sense. For example, and what it is unions are capitalist organizations. I mean, that's the one problem that we also have with the system of trying to organize workers against capitalism or against the system that exploits them, while at the exact same time using revenue, which is capital, in organizations which are run by and depend on capital. So it's almost like we want to get rid of what exploits the worker by using organizations that depend on exploiting of the system that exploits. Because at the end of the day, if any union isn't against charters, explicitly, that union isn't 100% for the public employee or for the worker. Charters do not help the public sector, do not help education in any way, shape, or form. In fact, studies show they actually lead to more segregation and more discrimination against not only minorities, but special education students, being that they bring down their grades or whatever, their GPAs or their averages. So they a lot of times find ways to say, oh, this isn't a suitable environment, where a public school will work with a parent, with a student, to try to find the best setting, But yeah, it's like, it's almost like Citizens United, same situation. Everyone that's for the worker knows Citizens United is a poison pill. It should be repealed. And the sad reality is that unions benefit from they also can get some of these private donations, and we have no idea who these individuals are that are donating. For example, SEIU supported Maria Brenes. Maria Brenes actually had received donations from Eli Road before, and Bloomberg was was it Bloomberg or Bloomfield, was one of the main PACs paying for her flyers. So I'm just saying, though, it doesn't seem too far-fetched to see that there is a financial connection in these some of these candidates, some of these organizations, and once again, who knows what these unions, and I'm not speaking specifically about Local 99 or UTLA. I'm just saying unions in general, since they receive some of these funds for some of their PACs, who's to say where those funds are coming from? Might be the very same charter villains, as I call them, aiding unions in unison for these candidates. We don't know.
Well, it seems like it's a two-tier system. If you're helping charters, you're actually undermining public education because they're privately run schools.
And there's no debate about that. Let's be very clear. If you're aiding in any way, shape, or form these capitalist charter organizations, or even the charterization of public education, you are anti-worker, period. You are anti-public education, period. So absolutely, I agree with that. And it's very important for us to be very clear, because just like these capitalist corporations that pollute, they have great PR, like BP was responsible for the Horizon disaster. But if you look at their commercials, bioenergy, algae, green earth, renewable. Like, I mean, they really sell you a story. And then when you look at what they really do, and the same happens in education, where you have the charters that are literally the biggest problem, the biggest siphoners of funds, of public education. You see their billboards, choice, education, it's like, what? And, they got a nice student with glasses looking studious as ever with his pencil. And then on the very bottom, CCSA, So I know most people, unfortunately, don't have time to delve into the weeds and look at, how these organizations propel their propaganda towards the public, how they do it, certain connections, so it's very important that we discuss it so that people can be more aware that not everything that shines is gold. And these charter schools, these charterizers wrap things up and they want to sell you this package, but at the end of the day, it's really a financial business deal that they're interested in. There's a lot of money in consulting these schools.
And you're 30,000 members. You have one of the largest locals in California of school workers. You're fighting for living wages. You're fighting against charters. I mean, you want to protect public education. Are your members prepared? What do they feel about the situation that they're in the mass surplus that the school district has, yet they're unwilling to share it with the workers who do the work?
Yeah, well, for sure, the workers, the rank and file workers are against charters, and they're against the privatization of services like these one-on-one BIDs, BIIs, but the union heads, that's up to them. When it comes to us organizing, I think we are fairly unified on the ranks. We want to focus on the wages. A lot of times it seems like the unions don't want to focus on wages, and they want to focus more on other issues. Even I bump heads constantly with my union when it comes to the messaging, because they always want to talk about clean schools and stuff like that. And really the workers are interested in alleviating the stresses and struggles of life, being able to pay for another bag of groceries, being able to keep their lights on, being able to pay for the roof over their heads. So the messaging has to be a lot stronger. And I'm hoping also, because today they actually counted the votes. So we had a strike vote to see if members were willing to go on strike, to get a sentiment. And it seems that over 90% of the workers are willing to go on strike. This was tabulated today. So you're getting an exclusive. So it might be released tomorrow or Monday. But once again, so the worker sentiment is there. Unfortunately, like the Democratic Party and like many large organizations, when it comes to, I was explaining, unions are capitalist organizations, you see? So they're not gonna be as gung-ho as the worker that says, you know what, fuck this. Inflation is through the roof. It was at 8.5 a couple months ago. Now they're saying they got it under control, or it's gonna be under control, and it's still at 6. Now, they're talking about maybe 4.6 next time. That's ridiculous, And if you think about it, it was at 8.6 or whatever. Even if a worker gets a 10% raise, because inflation is so high, really it's a 2% raise. Like, we have to be able to get compensated, not just for the annual work or the daily work, the day-to-day work, but compensated enough to be able to keep up with the expenses of life.
And how has gentrification affected your members? I mean, many of your members can't afford to live in Los Angeles. They have to commute. How is that affecting your members, this gentrification in Los Angeles?
Well, gentrification is a huge problem in LA, and you're right, it is actually affecting a lot of our members. Um, I know members that have had to move because their buildings were sold, and it's really difficult, especially in a job where a lot of our members are working, uh, living check to check. I mean, that one stat that keeps creeping up, that the average American can't, you know, handle I think a $400 or $600 expense or something like that. I mean, that's very real. I know members that live in cars. I know members that, in fact, one of the members on the executive board, she actually gets up at 4 in the morning. She goes out and she collects cans. She collects cans for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, goes back home, gets dressed, and then goes to work. I mean, this seems like fiction. I mean, and this is America. This is the richest country in the world, and you have employees that can't even pay for their living expenses because it's so out of control. There is no bills that alleviate the housing problem. There's no public housing bill that allows public housing to just spring up to alleviate that. There's no universal rent control. I mean, there's no one to speak for the workers. There's no one to speak for, and everyone that does speak for them, they only talk. That nobody pulls the lever and says, you know what, we need a political, economic, and social revolution that starts with founding a political party that takes on the political parties, that takes on some of these workers organizations that claim to be workers organizations but align themselves with capitalist interests.
And Governor Newsom, you have some experience with him in Los Angeles. Maybe you can mention that. But in the midst of COVID, there was no single payer. There was no health care in California. One of the issues that workers face is they get a wage increase, and part of that goes to health care. Instead of it going to raise the income, it actually goes to the insurance companies. And the Democrats are in charge, a supermajority in the legislature. They're in charge of Los Angeles. It seems like they're not interested in really pushing structural changes as far as the system that will protect healthcare, that will protect housing for workers like yourselves in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I mean, and we're back to square one. Unfortunately, in a capitalist system that's basically run by two capitalist political parties, there is no will. There is no will because morality and ethics doesn't rule. What rules is the profit motive, and it's despicable. In any moral society, we're living in the year 2023, and we don't have universal health care. Like that's ridiculous. The fact that they can't lower the retirement age. I mean, these comments, Medicare cover dental, hearing, and vision. I mean, these basic things that any moral, ethical, anything that you would want for your children, that you would want for your parents, for your grandparents, they're not interested in it if it doesn't produce revenue. If they can't sell stock, if they can't collect dividends, it's pathetic. It's pathetic. But yeah, I remember when there was a movement led by the nurses, to get universal health care. I think it was called the Healthy California Act, that would have established a route for single payer. And, some of these Democratic allies, when they was time to actually vote and read bills and pull bills, they did everything in their power to smother it, you know? I mean, the most famous one was Rendon, that ended up getting, people running against him, but that very villain was supported by, for example, the COPA, which is the political um, action committee of my union. So it's like, it's kind of difficult, because even the people there, like we have a gap in an absence of political theory. And a lot of these organizations, I believe, take advantage of that. And it's on purpose for sure, politically and culturally.
And you may be going on strike. Are you going to get support from the teachers in the UTLA and other workers in Los Angeles? There was just recently a strike of the UAW graduate students, researchers, also around the issue of wages, living wages for a COLA. They were demanding a COLA. You think that should be taken up by all labor? So it's not just about the service employees, but all workers face the same kind of attacks as far as their inflation and living standards.
Yeah, I actually, in regards to that, I spoke with the executive director, and I haven't been able to prove this, but I take his word for it. He said that they would help. I followed up and I asked him, and he said that they made a donation to the UC cause. So I was happy to hear that. Yeah, no, absolutely. Part of the problem is, once again, these very basic things like a cost of living adjustment with a guaranteed raise. Though we cannot leave it at a cost of living adjustment, because that would be reformist and counterproductive, because the reality is sometimes there isn't an increase in cost of living. Right now, yeah, inflation's going up and all that, but if they keep increasing interest rates and people keep losing their jobs, they're gonna be able to tame inflation, and maybe the cost of living won't be substantial. So I'm willing to say yes, every labor organization should take up a cost of living adjustment with a guaranteed wage increase. For example, cost of living adjustment plus a 5% or an 8% increase, something like that, written in contract. Not, oh, we'll see how much the budget is to see if we can appropriate that, and that's something that absolutely would help, because then you're talking about cost of living adjustment plus whatever the increase is. So it'd be a guaranteed minimum increase every single year. So yeah, and I think even what would help even more than that would be unions taking up the healthcare issue. Honestly, that is probably more important than that COLA, way more important, because right now, when it comes to contract bargaining, a lot of these organizations hold that chip. Well, we'd like to give you a raise, but we might have to increase the premiums for healthcare. Ooh, I don't know if we can do both, increase and healthcare. I don't know. Like, do you guys want healthcare? And they literally, and it's immoral. It's immoral. And why aren't we, as leftists, as activists, as labor organizers, pushing that and saying, no, actually, that's bullying tactics. Let's go ahead and get together, put a bill. All these labor unions have lobbyists. Okay, they've all contributed to campaigns. A lot of them have even phone banked for these candidates. Let's go ahead and pull together. Let's get this bill done. And now the worker doesn't have to have that threat constantly over his head, or have to stay in a job only to keep his health care. What kind of shit is that? Like, it's ridiculous, and we're having debates that have already been solved before I was born. These debates were already resolved. What should be done? Even FDR, his second economic bill of rights, a right to food, a right to housing, a right to to healthcare, a right to improve your health, a right to leisure. It's all there. Unfortunately, I don't know what happens. Either the alphabet soup agencies are extremely efficient in America, which seems to be the case, or we don't have the political will to go through and say, you know what, this system has to be grabbed by the collar and shaken, and the worker has to say enough is enough. One avenue isn't effective, the other one less effective. So let's go ahead and create a way for the worker to say, okay, you know what, I'm not happy with this situation, and funnel that discontent into a political electoral action. Not just say, okay, we know what the problem is, we know how you're getting dicked, we see how the capitalist system exploits you, but at the end there's no solution because you're gonna vote for Gavin Newsom. How is that a solution? So hopefully we can one day come to some kind of organizational consensus where leftists can unify and not just talk about forming a party, but doing it and having a class of professional revolutionaries that can do the work that is needed, that can go in and form unions in cases where there are no unions, and make that a political movement, not just a discussion on how is Bezos exploiting Amazon workers.
Well, I want to thank you very much for joining us on WorkWeek, Gilbert, and we look forward to a victory in your struggle. Your workers do the work and deserve a decent living, a decent wage, and a situation in which they can thrive, along with the children that you take care of every day in Los Angeles. So thanks for joining us on WorkWeek.
Absolutely, and socialist solidarity. Hasta la victoria.
Solidarity.